Naomi Elliot clutched her feverish daughter against her breast as the stagecoach bumped along the dusty trail toward Whispering Creek. The year was 1878, and the western frontier was as unforgiving as the whispers that had driven her from her hometown. A single woman with a child and no husband was an oddity most towns wouldn't tolerate for long. She'd heard Whispering Creek might be different, a place where she could start anew, where the sins of her past wouldn't haunt her every step. "How much longer, Mama?" 4-year-old Sarah asked, her voice weak from the illness that had plagued her for the past week. "Not long now, my sweet," Naomi whispered, brushing back Sarah's damp blonde curls from her forehead. The child's temperature hadn't broken despite the herbal remedies Naomi had tried. She needed a proper doctor, and soon. The other passengers in the stagecoach kept their distance, occasionally glancing with a mixture of pity and disdain at the young mother and her illegitimate child. Naomi was used to such looks. At 24, she had spent the last 4 years enduring them. "Poor thing," the older woman across from her murmured to her husband. "Traveling alone with a sick child, no wedding band either." Naomi pretended not to hear as she gazed out the window at the passing landscape. The vast prairie stretched endlessly, dotted with scrubby brush and the occasional stand of trees. In the distance, mountains rose like sentinels against the brilliant blue sky. It was beautiful in its wildness, a land of possibility if only people would let her be. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, jolting everyone forward. Sarah whimpered, and Naomi pulled her closer, humming softly to soothe her. "You heading to Whispering Creek for good, miss?" the driver's assistant asked, leaning in from his perch next to the driver. "Yes," Naomi replied, keeping her voice steady. "I've arranged to work at the general store. Old man Jenkins's place." The assistant raised an eyebrow. "Good luck with that. He's a fair employer, but the town." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to Sarah. "The town what?" Naomi asked, though she already knew. "Nothing, miss, just that it's a small place. People talk. And talk they would." Naomi had heard it all before. How no decent man would have her now. How she was soiled goods. How no cowboy worth his salt would claim a woman with another man's child. Sarah stirred in her arms, her little face flushed with fever. None of that mattered. All that mattered was giving her daughter a chance at a better life than the one they'd left behind. The stagecoach crested a hill, and Whispering Creek came into view. It wasn't much a main street with wooden buildings on either side, a church steeple rising above the rest, and scattered houses surrounding it. But to Naomi, it represented hope. As they pulled into town, Naomi could see people stopping to watch the stagecoach arrive. New faces were always a curiosity on the frontier. The coach came to a halt outside the stagecoach office, dust billowing around them. "Whispering Creek," the driver called out. "End of the line." The other passengers disembarked first, nodding politely but hurrying away as if Naomi's situation might be contagious. She gathered her meager belongings, one carpet bag containing all they owned in the world, and carefully maneuvered out of the coach with Sarah in her arms. "The general store is down the street, miss," the assistant said, pointing. "Jenkins lives above it." "Thank you," Naomi replied. "Is there a doctor in town? My daughter needs medicine." "Doc Sullivan's office is next to the saloon," he said, "but he charges dear for his services." Naomi nodded, mentally counting the few dollars she had tucked into her boot. It would have to be enough. Sarah's health came first. She made her way down the main street, aware of the stares following her progress. Women pulled their children closer as she passed, and men tipped their hats before quickly averting their gaze. Naomi kept her chin up, her blue eyes focused straight ahead. She had endured worse than whispers. The general store stood in the middle of town, its wide porch stacked with barrels and crates. A hand-painted sign proclaimed, "Jenkins General Merchandise, fair prices, quality goods." Naomi took a deep breath and climbed the steps. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. The store was dim after the bright sunlight outside, and it took a moment for her eyes to adjust. Shelves lined the walls, filled with everything from canned goods to bolts of cloth. The air smelled of coffee, leather, and tobacco. "Be right with you," called a gravelly voice from the back. Naomi shifted Sarah in her arms, wincing at the heat radiating from the child's body. "Mr. Jenkins," I'm Naomi Elliot. I sent a letter about the position. A man in his 60s emerged from behind a curtain, wiping his hands on his apron. His face was weathered, his white hair thinning, but his eyes were kind as they assessed her. Miss Elliot, yes, got your letter last week. His gaze moved to Sarah. And this must be your daughter. She don't look well. She has a fever, Naomi explained. I need to take her to the doctor, but I wanted to check in with you first. Jenkins nodded. Positions still open. Room upstairs is small but clean. $5 a week plus the room for your services. Store opens at 7, closes at 6, Sundays off for church. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I accept. You should know, he said, lowering his voice. Folks around here can be mighty particular about certain things. There's already talk. There's always talk, Naomi replied wearily. All I ask is a fair chance. Jenkins studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You'll get that from me at least. Go see Doc Sullivan now. Get your girl taken care of. You can move in tomorrow. Naomi thanked him and turned to leave, relief washing over her. At least she had secured employment and a roof over their heads. Now for Sarah's fever. The doctor's office was small but clean. Dr. Sullivan, a balding man with spectacles, examined Sarah with efficient movements. Influenza, most likely, he pronounced. Not uncommon this time of year. She needs rest, plenty of fluids, and this tonic 3 times daily. He handed Naomi a small brown bottle. That'll be $2. Naomi bit her lip but handed over the money, nearly half of what she had left. Thank you, doctor. Where are you staying tonight? He asked, watching her tuck the bottle into her bag. I'm not sure yet. I start at the general store tomorrow, the doctor frowned. The hotel charges $1 a night, the boarding house won't take. He glanced at Sarah. Women like me, Naomi finished for him. I understand. Sullivan had the grace to look embarrassed. The church sometimes offers shelter to travelers. Pastor Wilson might help. Naomi thanked him and left, her heart heavy. She had hoped for a warmer welcome, but it seemed Whispering Creek was no different from the town she'd fled. The church was a simple white building with a modest steeple. Pastor Wilson, a thin man with a perpetual frown, listened to her request with growing disapproval. We are God-fearing people in this town, Miss Elliot, he said stiffly. The church is not in the habit of condoning impropriety. My daughter is ill, Naomi said, her patience wearing thin. We need shelter for one night. Surely your God would not turn away a sick child. The pastor's frown deepened. There are consequences for sin, Miss Elliot. No cowboy would claim you with a child that isn't his. Perhaps this difficulty is a lesson from the Almighty. Tears of frustration burned behind Naomi's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Thank you for your time, Pastor, she said coldly, turning away. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Sarah whimpered in her arms, her little body burning with fever. Naomi stood in the middle of the street, at a loss. She couldn't afford the hotel, and it seemed no one else would take them in. You all right, madam? The deep voice startled her. Naomi turned to find a tall man astride a magnificent chestnut horse. He wore the typical garb of a cowboy: dusty jeans, a faded shirt, a well-worn leather vest, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. But there was nothing typical about the intensity of his gaze or the gentle concern in his voice. I'm fine, Naomi replied automatically. Just gathering my thoughts. The man tilted his head, studying her and the child in her arms. Your little one looks sick. She has a fever. The doctor gave us medicine, but Naomi trailed off, unwilling to admit their predicament to a stranger. But you need a place to stay, he finished for her. And this town ain't exactly rolling out the welcome wagon. Naomi looked up in surprise. How did you know? The cowboy's mouth curved into a wry smile. I've been watching. Not much happens in Whispering Creek that I don't notice. Name's Isaac Granger. I own a ranch just outside town. Naomi Elliot, she replied. And this is my daughter, Sarah. Isaac nodded. Miss Elliot, I don't mean to pry, but it's getting dark, and a woman and child shouldn't be out alone. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. Got a spare room that's yours if you want it. Just for tonight, until you get settled. Naomi stared at him, suspicious of his offer. She'd learned the hard way that men rarely gave without expecting something in return. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac added, My housekeeper, Mrs. Hawkins, lives at the ranch. She's a proper chaperone and she's handy with healing herbs. Might be able to help your little girl. Naomi hesitated, weighing her limited options. Stay on the street with a sick child or trust this stranger who seemed genuinely concerned. Why would you help us? She asked bluntly. You don't know us. Isaac's eyes, a startling shade of green, met her steadily. My ma raised me to help those in need. Besides, he added with a slight smile, Mrs. Hawkins would tan my hide if I left a sick child out in the cold. Despite her wariness, Naomi found herself believing him. Thank you, Mr. Granger. We accept your offer. Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath his worn shirt. Up close, Naomi could see that his face, though weathered by sun and wind, was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 30. Call me Isaac, he said, reaching for her carpet bag. Everyone does. He secured her bag to his saddle, then turned to her. May I? He asked, gesturing to Sarah. Naomi nodded, and Isaac gently took the sleeping child from her arms. He cradled Sarah with surprising tenderness, then handed her back up to Naomi once she was settled in the saddle. Hold on tight now, he said, mounting behind her in one smooth motion. Naomi stiffened at the unfamiliar proximity of a man's body. Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort and kept a respectful distance, though his arms necessarily bracketed her as he took the reins. Ready? He asked. Yes, Naomi replied, though she wasn't entirely sure she was. Isaac clicked his tongue and the horse began to move. As they rode out of town, Naomi was acutely aware of the whispers and stares following their departure. She could almost hear them. Poor Isaac Granger, getting himself tangled up with that woman and her bastard child. No good will come of it. But as the town fell away behind them and the vast prairie opened up before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset, Naomi felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. Perhaps Whispering Creek would prove as unwelcoming as everywhere else she'd been. But for tonight, at least, she and Sarah had shelter, thanks to the kindness of a stranger. Isaac didn't press her for conversation as they rode, for which Naomi was grateful. She focused on holding Sarah securely and on the rhythm of the horse beneath them. The sun had fully set by the time they reached the ranch, the sky ablaze with stars. The Granger ranch was larger than Naomi had expected. A two-story house stood proudly in a clearing, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. Lamplight glowed from the windows, warm and inviting. Isaac dismounted first, then reached up to take Sarah. Let me help you down, he said, offering his free hand to Naomi. She accepted, aware of the strength in his grip as he steadied her. Up close, in the light spilling from the house, she could see his face more clearly, the strong jaw shadowed with stubble, the straight nose, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Isaac Granger, is that you? Called a woman's voice from the porch. You're late for supper again. Got held up in town, Mrs. Hawkins, Isaac replied, guiding Naomi toward the house. And I've brought guests. Mrs. Hawkins was a stout woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes widened at the sight of Naomi and Sarah. Land sakes, the child's sick, she exclaimed, ushering them inside. Bring her right to the fire, Mr. Granger. Poor little mite's burning up. The interior of the house was comfortable and well-maintained. A large fireplace dominated the main room, with sturdy furniture arranged around it. Shelves lined with books spoke of a man who valued education despite his rugged profession. Mrs. Hawkins, this is Miss Elliot and her daughter, Sarah, Isaac said, laying the child gently on a sofa near the fire. They need a place to stay tonight. Miss Elliot's starting work at Jenkins's store tomorrow. Of course they'll stay, Mrs. Hawkins declared, already bustling about. I'll make up the guest room and fix some willow bark tea for the fever. You poor dear, she added to Naomi, you look dead on your feet yourself. Sit down before you fall down. Naomi sank gratefully into an armchair, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Thank you, she said. I have medicine from the doctor as well. Dr. Sullivan's remedies work well enough, Mrs. Hawkins sniffed, but my grandmother was a healer, and her recipes haven't failed me yet. Between the two, we'll have your little one feeling better by morning. True to her word, Mrs. Hawkins soon had Sarah sipping a sweet-smelling tea, the doctor's tonic mixed in. The housekeeper had produced a nightgown that swallowed the child's small frame, and Sarah's eyes were already drooping as the medicine took effect. "Supper's keeping warm," Mrs. Hawkins announced. "Mr. Granger, show Miss Elliot where she can freshen up while I settle the child." Isaac led Naomi to a small washroom off the kitchen. "Towels are on the shelf," he said. "Take your time. Mrs. Hawkins always makes enough food to feed an army." Left alone, Naomi stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the basin. Dark circles shadowed her blue eyes, and her golden-brown hair had escaped its pins during the long journey. She looked every bit as exhausted as she felt. She washed her face and hands, smoothed her hair as best she could, and straightened her travel-worn dress. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. When she returned to the main room, Isaac was standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames. He turned at her approach, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Your daughter's sleeping peacefully," he said. "Mrs. Hawkins put her in the guest room, said you should eat something before you collapse." "She's right," Naomi admitted. "I can't remember when I last had a proper meal." Isaac guided her to the dining room, where Mrs. Hawkins had laid out a simple but hearty supper: roast beef, potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread. Naomi's stomach growled embarrassingly at the sight. "Eat up," Mrs. Hawkins encouraged, filling Naomi's plate. "Nothing solves problems like a full belly." As they ate, Isaac asked casual questions about Naomi's journey, carefully avoiding anything too personal. Naomi found herself relaxing slightly, answering his queries about the stagecoach route and the weather they'd encountered. It felt almost normal, this shared meal and easy conversation. After supper, Mrs. Hawkins shooed them back to the main room while she cleared up. "I don't need help, Miss Elliot. You've had a long day. Rest yourself." Isaac poured 2 small glasses of whiskey and offered one to Naomi. She hesitated, then accepted. "I don't usually," she explained, "but today has been trying." Isaac finished for her. "I understand." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and Mrs. Hawkins humming as she worked in the kitchen. "Why did you really help us?" Naomi asked suddenly. "The truth, please." Isaac studied his glass, turning it slowly in his hands. "I saw how the town treated you," he said finally. "It wasn't right. A woman and child needing help shouldn't be turned away because of circumstances." "My circumstances being an unmarried woman with a child," Naomi said bluntly. Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Your circumstances being a mother doing her best for her daughter. The rest ain't my business." "It seems to be everyone else's business," Naomi replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Pastor Wilson made it quite clear what he thought of me. Said no cowboy would claim me with a child." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Wilson's always been quick to judge and slow to help, not what I call Christian behavior." "You don't share his view?" Naomi asked skeptically. "Miss Elliot, I've lived long enough to know that life is rarely simple and people's stories are their own to tell. I don't presume to judge what I don't understand." His words were like a balm to Naomi's wounded spirit. For 4 years, she had endured judgment and scorn. To be treated with simple human dignity was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Isaac nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're welcome to stay longer, you know, until your daughter's fully recovered." "That's very kind, but I start work tomorrow. Mr. Jenkins is expecting me." "Jenkins is a good man. He'll understand if you need another day." Naomi shook her head. "I can't afford to lose the position. Sarah and I need the stability." Isaac seemed about to argue, then thought better of it. "At least let me take you back to town in the wagon tomorrow. Be easier on the little one than horseback." "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." Mrs. Hawkins appeared in the doorway. "I've checked on the child. Her fever's coming down nicely. You should get some rest too, Miss Elliot." "I've put out a nightgown for you." Naomi thanked her and rose, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. "Good night, Mr. Granger. I can't thank you enough for your kindness." "Isaac," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome, Miss Elliot." "Naomi," she replied with a small smile. "Good night, Isaac." As she climbed the stairs to the guest room, Naomi felt a curious lightness in her chest. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and seen not a fallen woman, but simply a person deserving of kindness. Sarah was sleeping peacefully, her breathing easier, her cheeks less flushed. Naomi brushed a kiss against her daughter's forehead, relieved to find it cooler. She changed into the borrowed nightgown and slipped into bed beside Sarah, careful not to wake her. As sleep claimed her, Naomi's last conscious thought was of green eyes that held no judgment, only compassion. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. Naomi woke to find Sarah sitting up in bed, looking far better than she had the previous day. "Mama, I'm hungry," the child announced, a sure sign she was on the mend. "That's wonderful news, my love," Naomi said, pressing a kiss to Sarah's forehead. The fever had broken completely overnight. "Let's get dressed and see about breakfast." She helped Sarah into her clothes, noting with dismay how travel-worn they were. The girl's dress was faded and a bit too small, and her shoes were scuffed almost beyond repair. Once they were settled in town, Naomi would need to find fabric to make new clothes. Downstairs, they found Mrs. Hawkins in the kitchen, wielding a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton as she managed several pots at once. "There you are." "I was just about to call you down," the housekeeper said cheerfully. "And look at this little one, right as rain, just as I predicted. Sit yourselves down, breakfast is nearly ready." Sarah clambered onto a chair at the kitchen table, her blue eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Where are we, Mama?" she whispered. "At Mr. Granger's ranch," Naomi explained. "He was kind enough to give us shelter for the night." "Is he a cowboy?" Sarah asked excitedly. Like most children, she was fascinated by the romantic notion of cowboys and their adventures. "He's a rancher," Naomi corrected gently. "Same thing in these parts," came Isaac's deep voice from the doorway. He had clearly been up for hours, his clothes dusty from morning chores. "Good morning, Miss Elliot, and good morning to you, Miss Sarah. You're looking much better today." Sarah regarded him solemnly for a moment, then broke into a gap-toothed smile. "Do you have horses?" she asked without preamble. Isaac laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I do indeed, several of them. Would you like to see them after breakfast?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically, then turned to Naomi. "Can I, Mama, please?" Naomi hesitated. They needed to get to town, but the excitement in Sarah's eyes was impossible to resist. "If Mr. Granger doesn't mind, and if you eat all your breakfast." "I don't mind at all," Isaac assured them, taking a seat at the table. "The wagon's already hitched, we've plenty of time." Mrs. Hawkins set heaping plates before them: bacon, eggs, biscuits with honey, and grits. It was more food than Naomi and Sarah typically saw in several days, and they ate with grateful enthusiasm. "You've got a good appetite," Mrs. Hawkins observed approvingly. Nothing like seeing a child enjoy their food. After breakfast, Isaac took them to the barn where Sarah was introduced to the horses with all the ceremony due a visiting dignitary. The child was delighted, especially when Isaac lifted her up to pet a gentle mare's nose. "She likes me," Sarah exclaimed as the horse nuzzled her small hand. "She sure does," Isaac agreed, his eyes crinkling with his smile. "That's Daisy. She's got a soft spot for little girls." Watching them, Naomi felt a pang in her heart. Sarah had never known her father. The man had vanished at the first mention of pregnancy, leaving Naomi to face the consequences alone. She had never seen her daughter interact with a man who treated her with such natural kindness. "We should get going," Naomi said reluctantly. "Mr. Jenkins will be expecting us." Isaac nodded, setting Sarah down carefully. "The wagon's ready whenever you are." They gathered their few belongings, and Mrs. Hawkins pressed a basket into Naomi's hands. "Just some food for today," she explained, "and a few extra things for the little one." Growing girls need proper nourishment. Naomi's eyes filled with tears at the unexpected generosity. "Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins, for everything." "Nonsense," the older woman said gruffly, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "You come back and visit, you hear, both of you." The journey to town was pleasant in the morning sunshine. Sarah sat between Naomi and Isaac on the wagon seat, chattering happily about the horses and asking dozens of questions that Isaac answered with patient good humor. "Do you live all alone at your ranch?" Sarah asked innocently. "Sarah," Naomi admonished gently, "that's not polite to ask. It's all right," Isaac assured her. Yes, Miss Sarah, I live alone except for Mrs. Hawkins, who comes each day to cook and clean, and my ranch hands, of course, though they have their own bunkhouse. Don't you get lonely?" Sarah persisted. A shadow crossed Isaac's face. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I keep busy with the ranch." "Mama gets lonely too," Sarah confided. "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep." "Sarah," Naomi exclaimed, mortified. Isaac's gaze met hers briefly, understanding in his eyes. "Well," he said to Sarah, "everyone gets lonely sometimes. It's part of being human." As they approached town, Naomi felt her anxiety return. Would the people of Whispering Creek accept her and Sarah, or would they face the same ostracism they had experienced elsewhere? "Folks around here can be set in their ways," Isaac said, as if reading her thoughts. "But they're good people at heart. Give them time." "Time is a luxury we may not have," Naomi replied softly, "if Mr. Jenkins changes his mind about employing me." "He won't," Isaac said firmly. "And if anyone gives you trouble, you send word to me." They pulled up in front of the general store just as Mr. Jenkins was unlocking the door. "Morning, Jenkins," Isaac called cheerfully. "Brought your new employee and her daughter." Jenkins looked surprised to see them arriving with Isaac. "Morning, Granger, Miss Elliot," he nodded to Naomi. "You're right on time." Isaac helped Naomi and Sarah down from the wagon, then retrieved their carpet bag. "The room's upstairs," Jenkins told Naomi. "Nothing fancy, but it's clean. Take an hour to get settled, then come down to start work." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," Naomi said. "I appreciate the opportunity." Jenkins nodded, his gaze moving between her and Isaac with obvious curiosity. "Granger, you staying in town today?" "Got some business at the bank," Isaac replied, then heading back to the ranch. Naomi turned to Isaac, suddenly uncertain. How did one thank a man for such kindness? "Mr. Granger, Isaac, I don't know how to repay you for your help." Isaac shook his head. "No repayment necessary, Miss Elliot, just looking out for neighbors." "We're hardly neighbors," Naomi pointed out. "We only met yesterday." "Well, maybe we can change that," Isaac suggested, his tone casual though his eyes held a certain intensity. "If you and Sarah would like to come out to the ranch for Sunday dinner this weekend. After church, of course." Naomi hesitated, aware of Jenkins watching them with interest. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition," Isaac assured her. "Mrs. Hawkins already suggested it, said the child needs fattening up." Sarah tugged at Naomi's skirt. "Can we go, Mama, please? I want to see Daisy again." Faced with her daughter's pleading eyes and Isaac's warm invitation, Naomi found herself nodding. "Thank you, we'd be delighted." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, transforming his features. "I'll pick you up after the service then." As he climbed back into his wagon and drove away with a tip of his hat, Naomi felt a curious flutter in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her the way Isaac Granger did, as if she were worthy of respect, of kindness. Perhaps Whispering Creek would be different after all. The room above the general store was indeed small but clean, just as Jenkins had promised. It contained a narrow bed, a trundle that could be pulled out for Sarah, a small table with 2 chairs, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. A window overlooked the main street, letting in morning light. "It's cozy," Naomi told Sarah, trying to sound enthusiastic. "It's tiny," Sarah replied with a child's blunt honesty. "I liked the ranch better." "This is our home now," Naomi said firmly, unpacking their few possessions, "and we're lucky to have it." Working in the store proved less daunting than Naomi had feared. Jenkins was patient in teaching her the inventory system, and the tasks stocking shelves, measuring fabric, weighing flour and sugar were straightforward enough. Sarah spent the day quietly in a corner, playing with a rag doll Mrs. Hawkins had slipped into their basket. The customers were another matter. Women entered the store, took one look at Naomi, and either left immediately or conducted their business with tight-lipped disapproval. Men were more varied in their reactions. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while others stared too long, their gazes lingering inappropriately. By midday, Naomi was exhausted from the constant tension. When the lunch hour came, Jenkins noticed her pale face. "Take a break," he advised. "Get some air. Things'll settle down once the novelty wears off." Grateful for his understanding, Naomi took Sarah to a small grassy area behind the store. They shared the lunch. Mrs. Hawkins had packed thick sandwiches, apple slices, and oatmeal cookies while watching butterflies dance among the wildflowers. "I like Mr. Isaac," Sarah announced between bites. "He's nice and tall." "Yes, he is," Naomi agreed, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Is he going to be our friend?" Sarah asked hopefully. Naomi considered the question. "I think so, sweetheart, but we shouldn't expect too much. Mr. Granger is a busy man with his ranch to run." Sarah nodded solemnly, then asked the question Naomi had been dreading. "Why don't the people here like us, Mama? The ladies in the store looked at you mean." Naomi sighed, searching for words a 4-year-old could understand. "Some people have very strict ideas about how families should be. Because you don't have a father, they think we're different. But lots of people don't have fathers," Sarah protested. "Mary from our old town didn't. Her papa died in the war." "That's different, sweetheart. Mary's mother was married before her father died. I wasn't married to your father." Sarah's brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of this. "Is that bad?" "No," Naomi said firmly. "It's not bad. It's just not what some people think is proper, but what matters is that I love you more than anything in the world and we have each other." Sarah seemed to accept this explanation, her attention already drawn to a particularly colorful butterfly. Naomi watched her daughter play, her heart full of both love and sorrow. She had never regretted keeping Sarah, not for a single moment, but she regretted the prejudice her innocent child faced because of her mother's choices. The afternoon brought more customers and more awkward encounters. By closing time, Naomi's cheeks ached from maintaining a polite smile in the face of barely concealed disdain. "You did well today," Jenkins told her as they closed up the store. "Took all my orders correctly, gave proper change. That's all I ask." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," Naomi replied, grateful for his businesslike approach. "Will tomorrow be as busy?" "Friday's always busy," he confirmed. "Ranchers come in for supplies before the weekend." He hesitated, then added, "including Granger, most likely." Naomi felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the knowing look in the older man's eyes. "Mr. Granger was very kind to us when we needed help," she said carefully. Jenkins nodded. "He's a good man, Granger. Best rancher in the county, too. Built that spread from nothing after his folks passed." Naomi hadn't known Isaac was an orphan. The information made his kindness to her and Sarah even more touching. "Well, good night, Mr. Jenkins," she said, gathering Sarah, who was nodding off in her corner. "We'll see you in the morning." Upstairs in their room, Naomi settled Sarah into bed, then sat by the window, staring out at the darkening street. The main thoroughfare was still busy with evening activity, men heading to the saloon, a few families returning home from visiting friends, a couple strolling arm in arm. Normal life in a small town. A life that had always seemed just out of reach for Naomi. She thought of Isaac Granger, of his green eyes and the quiet strength in his manner. Of how he had lifted Sarah as if she were precious, not a burden or a mark of shame. Of his invitation to Sunday dinner. It was dangerous to think too much about such things. Men like Isaac Granger didn't court women like her, women with pasts, with children born out of wedlock. His kindness was just that kindness, nothing more. Still, as Naomi prepared for bed, she found herself hoping that Friday would bring Isaac to the store. Friday dawned clear and bright. Naomi woke early, taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her hair neatly, choosing her least worn dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. "You look pretty, Mama," Sarah observed as they headed downstairs to the store. "Thank you, sweetheart," Naomi replied, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. "Today will be busy, so I need you to be on your best behavior." "Because Mr. Isaac might come?" Sarah asked innocently. Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "Because it's a busy day for the store," she corrected gently. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Jenkins had been right. Friday brought ranchers and farmers to town for supplies. Naomi measured fabric, weighed sugar, counted nails, and wrapped purchases until her fingers were sore. She was helping an elderly woman select buttons when the bell above the door jingled, and Isaac Granger walked in. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. His eyes found Naomi immediately, and a smile broke across his face. "Morning, Jenkins," he called, nodding to the proprietor. "Miss Elliot, Granger," Jenkins replied. "Your usual order's ready, just need to add anything else you're wanting today." "Mr. Isaac," Sarah exclaimed, abandoning her corner to run to him. "Did you bring Daisy?" Isaac chuckled, crouching down to her level. "Not today, Miss Sarah. Daisy's back at the ranch, but she asked me to say hello to you." Sarah giggled delightedly at the idea of a horse sending greetings. "Will we still see her on Sunday?" "Sarah," Naomi admonished, conscious of the elderly customer watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. "Let Mr. Granger conduct his business." "It's no bother," Isaac assured her, rising to his full height. "And yes, Miss Sarah, you'll definitely see Daisy on Sunday. In fact, if your mama agrees, maybe you could even have a short ride." Sarah's eyes widened with excitement. "Can I, Mama, please?" Naomi hesitated. "We'll see," she said diplomatically. "Now, back to your corner, please. I need to finish helping Mrs. Abernathy." As Sarah reluctantly returned to her play area, Naomi became aware of Mrs. Abernathy's disapproving stare. "Children need a firm hand," the older woman said pointedly. "Especially those raised without a father's guidance." Naomi felt her face flame, but before she could respond, Isaac spoke up. "I've always found Miss Sarah to be exceptionally well-behaved," he said pleasantly, though there was steel beneath his words. "A credit to her mother's excellent parenting." Mrs. Abernathy sniffed but said nothing further, completing her purchase in frosty silence before departing. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly once the woman had left, "but you shouldn't feel obligated to defend us." "It wasn't obligation," Isaac replied, his green eyes serious. "It was the truth." Jenkins cleared his throat. "Your order, Granger, got that grain you wanted and the new axe head." Isaac turned his attention to business, discussing supplies and prices with Jenkins while Naomi helped other customers. She was conscious of his presence throughout, the deep timbre of his voice, the way other men deferred to him, slightly a sign of respect. When his business was concluded and his purchases loaded onto his wagon, Isaac approached Naomi once more. "I wondered if you and Sarah might like to join me for supper at the hotel dining room tomorrow evening," he said, his tone casual though his eyes were intent. "Saturday's usually quiet and they serve a decent meal." Naomi was taken aback by the invitation. Dining together in public would be seen as a statement in a town this small. "That's very kind, but please say yes, Mama," Sarah interrupted, having crept close enough to overhear. "I'm tired of eating alone upstairs." Naomi looked from her daughter's hopeful face to Isaac's expectant one. "People will talk," she warned him quietly. "People always talk," Isaac replied with a shrug. "Doesn't make what they say true or important." His cavalier attitude toward town gossip was both refreshing and concerning. Didn't he understand what associating with her could do to his reputation? "6 o'clock, he prompted when she remained silent. "I'll come by to escort you." "Yes," Naomi found herself saying. "Thank you." 6 o'clock would be fine. The smile that lit up his face made her heart skip a beat. "Until tomorrow, then." After he left, Jenkins approached her with a knowing look. "Granger seems mighty interested in your company." "He's just being neighborly," Naomi insisted, busying herself with straightening a display of canned goods. "Neighborly don't usually include fancy suppers at the hotel," Jenkins observed dryly. "Man's never shown this much interest in any woman in town before, and there've been plenty trying to catch his eye." Naomi didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "Should I restock the flour bins now or wait until closing?" Jenkins allowed the deflection with a chuckle. "Now's fine. But mark my words, Miss Elliot, Isaac Granger ain't the type to trifle with a woman's affections. If he's showing interest, it's genuine." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of customers and tasks, but Jenkins's words echoed in Naomi's mind. Could Isaac truly be interested in her, knowing her circumstances? It seemed impossible, yet the memory of his smile, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, suggested otherwise. That night, as Naomi brushed Sarah's hair before bed, her daughter asked the question that had been lingering in her own mind. "Do you like Mr. Isaac, Mama?" Naomi's hands stilled. "He's been very kind to us," she replied carefully. "But do you like him?" Sarah persisted. "The way Mrs. Peterson liked Mr. Peterson before they got married," Naomi nearly dropped the hairbrush. "Sarah, where did you get such an idea?" "I heard the ladies at church talking," Sarah said innocently. "They said Mr. Isaac needs a wife and you need a husband, so it makes sense." Out of the mouths of babes, Naomi set the brush aside and turned Sarah to face her. "Sweetheart, life isn't that simple. Mr. Granger and I barely know each other, and many people wouldn't approve of him courting someone like me. Because I don't have a papa." Sarah asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. "Yes," Naomi admitted. "Some people think that makes us less worthy." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion, "But Mr. Isaac doesn't think that. He likes us." "He's been kind to us," Naomi corrected gently. "That's different from wanting to court me or be a father to you." "I think he does want to," Sarah insisted with a child's certainty. "He looks at you the way Mr. Peterson looks at Mrs. Peterson." Naomi tucked her daughter into bed, deflecting further questions with a story. But as she prepared for her own rest, Sarah's words replayed in her mind. Was it possible that Isaac Granger saw something in her worth pursuing? And if he did, what then? Saturday morning brought a steady stream of customers to the store, keeping Naomi too busy to dwell on the evening ahead. By mid-afternoon, however, her nerves were getting the better of her. "Go on upstairs early," Jenkins told her as the store emptied around 4 o'clock. "Get yourself and the little one ready for your supper. I can handle things down here." Grateful for his understanding, Naomi took Sarah upstairs to prepare. She washed both their faces, brushed their hair until it shone, and dressed them in their Sunday best, the only clothes they owned that weren't work-worn and faded. "You look beautiful, Mama," Sarah declared as Naomi pinned her hair up in a simple but elegant style. "Thank you, sweetheart," Naomi replied, smoothing the skirt of her dark green dress. It was 3 years old and slightly out of fashion, but it was well made and flattering to her figure. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock came at the outside door that led to their rooms. Naomi's heart leapt into her throat as she went to answer it. Isaac stood on the small landing, hat in hand, dressed in clean clothes that, while still simple, were clearly his best. His dark hair was damp and neatly combed, and he had shaved, revealing a strong jawline usually hidden beneath stubble. "Miss Elliot," he said, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Naomi replied, fighting a blush. "Please come in while we get our shawls." Isaac stepped into the small room, seeming to fill it with his presence. "Evening, Miss Sarah," he greeted the child. "You look mighty pretty yourself." Sarah beamed, twirling to show off her best dress. "Mama says I have to use my best manners tonight," she informed him solemnly. "Well, I'll be sure to use mine too, then," Isaac replied with equal seriousness. The hotel dining room was only half full when they arrived, but every head turned to watch their entrance. Naomi felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers that followed them to their table. "Ignore them," Isaac murmured, his hand warm on the small of her back as he guided her to a table by the window. "Their opinions don't matter. Easy for you to say," Naomi whispered back. "Your reputation isn't at stake." Isaac's gaze was steady as he held her chair. "I care more about doing what's right than what people think of me." The meal itself was pleasant, despite the occasional disapproving glance from other diners. Isaac kept the conversation light for Sarah's benefit, telling amusing stories about the animals on his ranch and asking about her favorite things. "What about you, Miss Elliot?" he asked as they were served apple pie for dessert. "What brings you to Whispering Creek of all places?" Naomi hesitated, conscious of Sarah listening attentively. "A fresh start," she said finally. "The opportunity Mr. Jenkins offered seemed promising." Isaac nodded, understanding her reluctance to say more in front of her daughter, and before Whispering Creek, where was home? "Nowhere really," Naomi admitted. "We've moved often in the past few years. Chicago originally, then St. Louis, then smaller towns as we made our way west." "That's a lot of moving for a little one," Isaac observed, his gaze softening as he looked at Sarah, who was happily demolishing her pie. "It hasn't been ideal," Naomi agreed, "but necessary." Isaac seemed about to ask more, then thought better of it. "Well, I hope Whispering Creek proves to be a place you can put down roots." As they finished their meal and prepared to leave, a woman at a nearby table deliberately turned her back as they passed, murmuring something to her companion that made both of them laugh derisively. Naomi's cheeks burned with humiliation, but Isaac surprised her by stopping directly in front of the women. "Evening, Mrs. Thompson, Miss Garrett," he said pleasantly. "Lovely to see you both enjoying the hotel's fine cuisine. Have you had the pleasure of meeting Miss Elliot? She's new to our town and working at Jenkins's store." The women had no choice but to acknowledge them, though their greetings were frosty at best. Naomi nodded politely, holding tightly to Sarah's hand. Outside, as they walked back toward the store, Naomi couldn't contain her confusion. "Why did you do that? Draw their attention to us deliberately?" Isaac's expression was determined. "Because hiding and acting ashamed only gives power to their gossip. If we behave as if there's nothing improper about our acquaintance, which there isn't, eventually they'll have to accept it. Or they'll make life impossible for all of us," Naomi countered. "You don't understand what it's like to be ostracized, to have doors closed in your face, to be turned away from decent housing because of your situation." "You're right," Isaac conceded. "I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to be judged unfairly." There was something in his tone that made Naomi look at him more closely. "What do you mean?" Isaac sighed, his gaze distant. "My father was a good man, but he had a weakness for gambling, lost our family farm back east when I was 15. We came west to start over, but the rumors followed. Granger can't be trusted with money, they said. He'll gamble away anything he touches." "That's terrible," Naomi said softly. "To judge a son for his father's mistakes. People find it easier to believe the worst," Isaac replied. "When my parents died of influenza and I inherited their small claim, most folks in town gave me 6 months before I lost it all. Instead, I built it into one of the most successful ranches in the territory." "Through hard work and determination," Naomi surmised. Isaac nodded. "And by not giving a damn what people thought I could or couldn't do." He glanced down at Sarah, who was skipping ahead of them. "Pardon my language," Naomi smiled despite herself. "It's a good lesson," she admitted, though harder to apply when a child's welfare is at stake. They reached the outside stairs leading up to her rooms. Isaac insisted on escorting them all the way up, checking that the door was secure once they were inside. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Naomi said, suddenly shy in the small confines of the room, aware of Sarah watching them with undisguised interest. "The pleasure was mine," Isaac replied. "I'll see you both tomorrow at church. I can save you seats if you'd like." Naomi hesitated. Church would be difficult. The judgment there would be even more pronounced than in town. But Sarah needed the normalcy of Sunday services, and Naomi refused to let fear rule her decisions. "Yes, we'll be there," she confirmed, "though you needn't save us seats." "I insist," Isaac said firmly. 8 o'clock. I'll be watching for you." After he left, Sarah bombarded Naomi with questions about Isaac, the ranch, and when they would see him again. Naomi answered patiently, though she cautioned her daughter not to get too attached to the idea of Isaac being a regular part of their lives. "But he likes us," Sarah protested as Naomi tucked her into bed. "And we like him. Why can't we see him all the time?" "It's complicated, sweetheart," Naomi sighed. "Mr. Granger is being kind, but that doesn't mean he wants more than friendship." Even as she said the words, Naomi wasn't sure she believed them. The way Isaac had looked at her across the dinner table, the warmth in his eyes when he smiled at her, suggested his interest might indeed go beyond simple kindness, but wanting something didn't make it possible. The gulf between them, her past, her child, his position in the community, might prove too wide to bridge. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the church bells ringing across town to call the faithful to worship. Naomi dressed Sarah in her best dress again, then donned her own Sunday attire, a navy blue dress with white lace at the collar and cuffs, simple but respectable. "Will Mr. Isaac really be waiting for us?" Sarah asked as they left their rooms. "I believe so," Naomi replied, straightening Sarah's bonnet. "But remember what we discussed about behavior in church. Sit quietly, listen to the pastor, and be respectful," Sarah recited dutifully. "I remember, Mama." The church was nearly full when they arrived, families and individuals finding their usual pews. Naomi hesitated at the entrance, suddenly uncertain. Where should they sit? The back seemed safest, but she didn't want Sarah to feel they had anything to hide. Then she spotted Isaac standing near the front, scanning the crowd. When he saw them, his face lit up and he waved them forward. "He saved us seats, Mama," Sarah whispered excitedly, tugging at Naomi's hand. "Come on." Every eye in the congregation seemed to follow their progress as they made their way to where Isaac waited. He had indeed saved them places, in a pew near the front where his family had apparently sat for generations. "Good morning," he greeted them warmly, moving aside so they could sit. "I'm glad you could make it." The whispers around them were like the buzzing of angry bees, but Isaac seemed oblivious, his attention focused solely on ensuring they were comfortable. Naomi felt both grateful for his support and terrified of the consequences. Pastor Wilson appeared from a side door, his expression souring when he spotted Naomi and Sarah sitting with Isaac. His sermon that morning seemed particularly pointed, focusing on the sins of the flesh and the importance of moral purity. "The Lord forgives those who truly repent," he intoned, his gaze sweeping meaningfully over Naomi. "But forgiveness requires acknowledgement of sin and a commitment to righteous living henceforth." Beside her, Isaac tensed, his jaw tightening. Naomi laid a gentle hand on his arm, silently urging him to let it go. She had expected this, it was nothing she hadn't heard before. After the service, most of the congregation filed out quickly, avoiding direct interaction with Naomi. A few of the women whispered behind their hands, casting disapproving glances her way. Pastor Wilson made a point of greeting everyone at the door, everyone, except Naomi, Sarah, and by extension, Isaac. "Well, that was about what I expected," Naomi said quietly as they left the church. "It was inexcusable," Isaac replied, his voice tight with anger. "Using the pulpit to cast judgment, that's not Christianity as I understand it." "It's how it's always been," Naomi sighed, "at least in my experience." Isaac shook his head, his expression determined. "It doesn't have to be that way. Not here, not anymore." As they walked toward the waiting wagon, an older woman approached them. Naomi recognized her as Mrs. Daniels, the widow who ran the town's small library. "Miss Elliot," she said, her voice kind if a bit hesitant. "I wondered if your daughter might be interested in story hour at the library on Tuesday afternoons. We have several children who attend." Naomi was momentarily speechless at this unexpected overture. "That's very kind, Mrs. Daniels. Sarah loves stories, don't you, sweetheart?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Can I go, Mama, please?" "Of course," Naomi agreed, still somewhat stunned. "Thank you for the invitation." Mrs. Daniels smiled, patted Sarah's head, and continued on her way. Naomi watched her go, a flicker of hope kindling in her chest. Perhaps not everyone in Whispering Creek shared Pastor Wilson's rigid views. "Shall we head to the ranch?" Isaac asked, helping them into the wagon. "Mrs. Hawkins has been cooking since dawn, and she'll have my hide if we're late." The drive to the ranch was pleasant, with Sarah pointing out interesting sights along the way and asking dozens of questions about the animals they passed. By the time they arrived, Naomi felt some of the tension from the church service beginning to ease. Mrs. Hawkins welcomed them warmly, clucking over how thin Sarah still looked and ushering them inside where a feast awaited: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh biscuits, and an apple pie cooling on the windowsill. "You've gone to too much trouble," Naomi protested. "Nonsense," Mrs. Hawkins replied. "It's a pleasure to cook for appreciative eaters. This one," she jerked her thumb at Isaac, "would be satisfied with beans and bacon every night." Isaac grinned, not denying the accusation. "Mrs. Hawkins thinks I need civilizing influence." "That you do," the housekeeper agreed tartly. "Now sit, all of you. Food's getting cold." The meal was delicious, the conversation easy and natural. Sarah charmed Mrs. Hawkins completely, helping to clear the table and asking politely for a second slice of pie. "Such nice manners," Mrs. Hawkins approved. "You've raised her well, Miss Elliot." "Thank you," Naomi replied, touched by the simple acknowledgement of her parenting. After the meal, Isaac made good on his promise to let Sarah see Daisy again. While the child was suitably distracted with the gentle mare, Isaac guided Naomi to a bench near the corral. "I wanted to talk to you privately," he said, his expression serious. "About what happened at church today," Naomi sighed. "It was unpleasant but not unexpected." "It was wrong," Isaac insisted, And I won't stand for it continuing. You and Sarah deserve to be treated with respect. That's not how the world works for women in my situation, Naomi said gently. I've accepted that. Well, I haven't, Isaac replied, his green eyes intense. Naomi, Miss Elliot, I need to be honest with you. The use of her first name startled her. About what? About my intentions. I didn't invite you to dinner or to church merely out of neighborly kindness. I find myself drawn to you, to your strength, your dignity, your devotion to your daughter. Naomi stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. Mr. Granger, Isaac, he corrected. Please. Isaac, she amended. You can't mean that. You barely know me, and my circumstances, I know enough, he interrupted gently. I know you're a loving mother, a hard worker, and a woman of remarkable courage. As for your circumstances, the past is the past. I'm interested in the future. Naomi shook her head, her heart racing. It's not that simple. The town would never accept me as someone worthy of your attention. You'd be risking your standing in the community. Let me worry about that, Isaac said, reaching for her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. All I ask is the chance to court you properly, to see if what I'm feeling might be returned. Naomi looked down at their joined hands, then across the corral where Sarah was giggling as Daisy nuzzled her hair. The scene tugged at her heart, her daughter, happy and carefree in this peaceful place with this good man. It would be difficult, she warned, turning back to him. People will talk. They'll say terrible things. Let them, Isaac replied. Words can only hurt if we give them power. And Sarah, have you considered what it would mean to be involved with a woman who has a child? Isaac's gaze moved to Sarah, his expression softening. I've considered it carefully. Sarah is part of who you are. I wouldn't want it any other way. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes at his words. No man had ever looked at Sarah as anything but a burden, a mark of shame. Yet here was Isaac Granger, a respected rancher who could have his pick of unmarried women, declaring his interest despite or perhaps even partly because of her daughter. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll allow me to call on you, Isaac suggested. That's all I ask for now. Time to get to know each other better. Naomi looked into his earnest face and felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a door starting to open. Yes, she said softly. I'd like that. The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Thank you, he said simply, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly. Isaac gave Sarah the promised ride on Daisy, leading the horse carefully around the corral while the child squealed with delight. Mrs. Hawkins packed a basket of leftovers for them to take back to town, and as the sun began to set, Isaac hitched up the wagon for the return journey. Same time next Sunday, he asked as he helped them aboard. If you're sure, Naomi replied, still somewhat dazed by the turn events had taken. I've never been more sure of anything, Isaac said, his voice low and sincere. As they drove back to Whispering Creek in the gathering dusk, Sarah fell asleep against Naomi's side, worn out from the excitement of the day. Naomi gazed at the sleeping child, then at the man beside her, his profile strong against the sunset sky. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one that included a home, stability, and perhaps even love. It seemed impossible, yet the warmth in Isaac's eyes when he looked at her made her wonder if impossible things might sometimes come true. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Naomi worked at the store during the day while Sarah attended story hour at the library on Tuesdays, and sometimes played with other children under Mrs. Daniels's watchful eye. Isaac called on them regularly, bringing small gifts, a ribbon for Sarah's hair, a book of poetry for Naomi, fresh eggs from his hens. On Saturdays, he escorted them to supper at the hotel, deliberately ignoring the whispers that still followed them. On Sundays, they attended church together, Isaac steadfastly leading them to his family's pew, despite Pastor Wilson's disapproving glares, and then spent the afternoon at the ranch. Gradually, imperceptibly, the attitudes in town began to shift. Not everyone, of course some, like Pastor Wilson and several of the older matrons, remained coldly disapproving. But others, seeing Isaac's steady devotion and Naomi's quiet dignity, began to thaw. Mrs. Daniels invited Naomi to join the ladies' reading circle. Mr. Jenkins gave her more responsibility in the store, praising her meticulous bookkeeping. The baker's wife, Mrs. Schmidt, started saving a sugar cookie for Sarah when Naomi came to buy bread. Small gestures, but meaningful ones. Signs that perhaps Whispering Creek might become a true home after all. One evening in late October, as autumn painted the prairie in golds and reds, Isaac came to call as usual. But there was something different about him, a nervous energy, an intensity in his gaze that made Naomi's heart beat faster. "I thought we might take a walk," he suggested after greeting her and Sarah. "The sunset promises to be spectacular." Naomi agreed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. Sarah was invited to stay with Mrs. Schmidt, who had grown quite fond of the child and often asked to borrow her for an hour or two. They walked in companionable silence through town and out toward the creek that gave Whispering Creek its name. The water burbled gently over stones, reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. "It's beautiful," Naomi said, gazing at the scene. "Yes, it is," Isaac replied, though when she turned to look at him, he was watching her, not the sunset. He took her hand, guiding her to a fallen log where they could sit. For a long moment, he seemed to struggle for words unusual for a man normally so confident. "Naomi," he began finally, "these past weeks have been the happiest of my life." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Mine too. I've watched you with Sarah, seen your strength and your gentleness. I've come to admire you more than I can say. And I find myself falling in love with you a little more each day." Naomi's breath caught. They had grown closer, yes, and there had been meaningful glances, hands held longer than necessary, but neither had spoken of love until now. "Isaac," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "Please let me finish," he said gently. "I know it hasn't been easy for you in town. I know there are still those who judge you for your past, but I've never cared about that, not from the moment I first saw you standing in the street with Sarah in your arms, so brave and so alone." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Naomi's heart seemed to stop as he opened it, revealing a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained. "She always said pearls represented tears transformed into something beautiful. It reminded me of you, how you've taken life's hardships and transformed them through your courage and love." He slid from the log to one knee before her, holding the ring up between them. "Naomi Elliot, I love you. I love Sarah too, as if she were my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Naomi stared at him, tears filling her eyes. This good, honorable man was offering her everything she had never dared to hope for: love, security, a father for her daughter, a place to belong. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The talk will never fully stop. There will always be those who remember, who whisper." "Let them whisper," Isaac said firmly. "What matters is us, you, me, and Sarah, the family we could be together." Family, the word resonated in Naomi's heart. "Yes," she said, the tears spilling over. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." His face lit with joy as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her hand. Isaac rose, drawing her up with him, and kissed her, their first kiss, sweet and tender and full of promise. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I think I started falling in love the moment I lifted you onto my horse." Naomi laughed softly, remembering that day, how lost she had felt, how hopeless, until Isaac appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't dared to make. "I love you too," she said. "I never thought I could have this, a second chance, a man who would accept Sarah and me together." "They said no cowboy would claim you with a child," Isaac reminded her, brushing a tear from her cheek. "They were wrong." Hand in hand, they walked back to town in the gathering twilight, their hearts full of plans for the future: a wedding before Christmas, a new room added to the ranch house for Sarah, perhaps more children in time. As they approached the bakery to collect Sarah, Naomi spotted Pastor Wilson across the street, watching them with his usual disapproval. But for once, his judgment held no power over her. She had found love and acceptance where she least expected it, and no one could take that away. Sarah emerged from the bakery with a sticky face and hands, evidence of Mrs. Schmidt's indulgence. Her eyes widened at the sight of the ring on Naomi's finger. "Are you going to marry Mr. Isaac?" she asked excitedly. "Is he going to be my papa?" Naomi glanced at Isaac, who knelt down to Sarah's level. "If you'd like me to be," he said seriously. "I'd be honored to be your papa, Sarah." Sarah launched herself into his arms, sticky hands and all. "I'd like that very much," she declared. "Daisy will be so happy." Isaac laughed, lifting the child into his arms. "She certainly will," he agreed. "The whole ranch will be happy." As they walked together toward home, Naomi's hand in Isaac's, Sarah perched on his hip. Naomi felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. In Isaac's love, in the family they were creating together, she had found redemption. Not the kind Pastor Wilson preached about from his pulpit, but a deeper, truer kind, the redemption of being fully known and fully loved, just as she was. They were married 2 weeks before Christmas in a small ceremony at the ranch. Mrs. Hawkins decorated the house with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and Mrs. Daniels played the piano as Naomi walked toward Isaac, with Sarah proudly scattering flower petals ahead of her. Not everyone from town attended. Pastor Wilson and his staunchest supporters were conspicuously absent, but those who came embraced the couple with genuine warmth. Mr. Jenkins gave Naomi away, Mrs. Schmidt baked a magnificent wedding cake, and even the bank president offered congratulations. As Isaac slipped a gold band onto her finger to join the pearl engagement ring, Naomi felt the last of her doubts melt away. This was right. This was where she belonged. "I, Isaac, take you, Naomi, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." When it was her turn, Naomi's voice trembled slightly with emotion. "I, Naomi, take you, Isaac, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. By the power vested in me," intoned the justice of the peace who had come from the next town to perform the ceremony, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Isaac drew her into his arms, his kiss a promise and a pledge. Around them, their friends applauded, and Sarah clapped her hands in delight. They celebrated with food and music and dancing, the ranch house filled with laughter and goodwill. As evening fell, Sarah, exhausted from the excitement, fell asleep in Mrs. Hawkins's lap. "I'll put her to bed," the housekeeper offered with a knowing smile. "You two should take some time for yourselves." Isaac led Naomi out onto the porch, where the winter night was crisp and clear, stars spangling the vast prairie sky. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, then drew her into his arms. "Happy, Mrs. Granger?" he asked, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Naomi replied, leaning into his warmth. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find it was all a dream." "Not a dream," Isaac assured her, his arms tightening around her. "Our life together is just beginning." Inside, someone started playing a slow, sweet melody on the piano. Isaac took Naomi's hand, drawing her into a dance there on the porch, just the two of them under the stars. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "You and Sarah are the greatest gifts I could have asked for. And you are ours," Naomi replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible it could contain such happiness. "The answer to a prayer I was afraid to pray." As they danced, Naomi thought of the long journey that had brought her to this moment, the hardships, the judgment, the lonely nights when she had wondered if she and Sarah would ever truly belong anywhere. How strange and wonderful that the end of that journey should be here, in the arms of a man who saw her past not as a burden, but as part of what had shaped her into the woman he loved. They had faced the whispers together and emerged stronger. They had built a bridge across the gulf of prejudice and found each other on the other side. And now they would build a life together, Isaac, Naomi, and Sarah, a family forged not by convention but by choice and love. As the stars wheeled overhead and the music played on, Naomi knew with absolute certainty that she was home at last. 5 years later, Naomi stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Isaac taught their son, James, to ride his first pony. At 7, Sarah sat her own horse with confidence, calling out encouragement to her 3-year-old brother. "Sit up straight, Jamie. Hold the reins like Papa showed you." "He's doing fine, Sarah," Isaac called with a laugh. "He's got a natural seat, just like his big sister." Naomi smiled, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child grew. The ranch had prospered under Isaac's careful management, allowing them to build in addition to the house a proper bedroom for Sarah, a nursery for James, and soon, a room for the new baby. Whispering Creek had changed too. Pastor Wilson had moved on to another parish 2 years ago, replaced by a younger, more compassionate minister who welcomed all to his congregation. The whispers about Naomi's past had gradually faded, replaced by respect for the capable woman who now helped Isaac manage the ranch accounts and served on the school board. Sarah had blossomed in the security of their family, excelling in her studies and showing a natural affinity for horses that delighted Isaac. She called him Papa now, and if she sometimes asked questions about her birth father, they answered honestly but gently, assuring her that she was loved completely and unconditionally. James was the image of Isaac, with the same green eyes and determined chin. He followed his father everywhere, a tiny shadow in boots too big for him, soaking up everything Isaac taught him about ranching and life. "Mama, look," James called now, sitting up proudly on his pony. "I'm riding by myself." "I see you, sweetheart," Naomi called back, her heart full. "You're doing wonderfully." Isaac led the pony in a careful circle, his hand never far from James's back, ready to catch him if he should slip. Their eyes met across the yard, and the love in Isaac's gaze still had the power to take Naomi's breath away. 5 years of marriage had only deepened their connection. They had weathered challenges together, a drought that threatened the ranch, Sarah's bout with scarlet fever, the usual disagreements that come with blending lives. Through it all, their commitment to each other had never wavered. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in gold and amber, Isaac lifted James from the pony and sent the children to wash up for supper. He crossed the yard to join Naomi on the porch, his face lined with the sun and wind but his eyes as bright as ever. "How are you feeling?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "Wonderful," Naomi replied truthfully. "A bit tired, but wonderful." Isaac smiled, drawing her into his arms. "You are the strongest woman I know, Naomi Granger, and the most beautiful," she laughed softly. "Even when I'm as big as a house." "Especially then," he assured her, his hand caressing the curve where their child grew. "There's nothing more beautiful to me than watching you carry our children." From inside came the sounds of Sarah and James arguing over whose turn it was to set the table. Life with children was never quiet, never perfectly orderly, but Naomi wouldn't have changed a single thing. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, voicing a question that still occasionally haunted her. "Taking on a ready-made family, all the gossip we faced." Isaac's expression grew serious. "Never," he said firmly. "Not for a single moment. Sarah is as much my daughter as James is my son, and you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are the heart of this family, Naomi. The best decision I ever made was lifting you onto my horse that day." Naomi leaned into his embrace, remembering that moment, how hopeless she had felt, how desperate. Pastor Wilson's cruel words echoing in her ears. No cowboy would claim you with a child. How wrong he had been. Isaac had claimed them both, with a love so generous and complete it had transformed their lives. And in doing so, he had proven that true worth was measured not by society's rigid standards, but by the capacity of the heart to love without condition or reservation. "Mama, Papa." James put frogs in the wash basin again. Sarah's indignant voice called from inside. Isaac laughed, pressing a quick kiss to Naomi's lips before releasing her. "Duty calls, Mrs. Granger." "Indeed it does, Mr. Granger," Naomi replied with a smile. "Our perfectly imperfect family awaits." Hand in hand, they went inside to manage the latest crisis, their hearts full of the quiet joy that comes from building a life on the foundation of true love, a love that saw beyond circumstances to the person within, a love that claimed and cherished without reservation or regret. The whispers had long since faded away, replaced by the laughter and squabbles of their children, the comfortable conversations of their evenings together, the soft words of love exchanged in the privacy of their bedroom. This was the life Naomi had never dared to dream of, yet somehow found a life built on second chances and the courage to reach for happiness against all odds. As she watched Isaac patiently explaining to James why frogs belonged in the pond, not the wash basin, while Sarah rolled her eyes in big sister exasperation, Naomi felt a profound gratitude wash over her. For the man who had seen her worth when others saw only her past. For the family they had created together. For the love that had claimed them all and made them whole.